let us take the grammatical category which we are defining to be in terms of features to be something which involves a statement like this language has the feature number. What does that possibly mean? Right? We know that this statement can only be true if the number has either single or singular, in contrast with plural, in contrast with dual, in contrast with maybe trial or vocal, or etc. So a feature is something that creates a set of values that are in contrastive distribution along a single parameter, which might be meaning or grammatical function that unifies these values. Right? The name of the feature then is the property that is used to construct the set. So when we say a language has number, we mean it has one of the feature values, one or more of the feature values. Let us employ this as our working definition of a feature. That is, a feature names the property that unifies a set of values in contrastive distribution. So to identify a feature, then we have to be able to unify a set of values by a single property. Right? The values of singular and plural can be considered the members of the same set, unified by the property marks the quantities of items, informally speaking. However, the feature values masculine and singular cannot be unified under a single feature label because there is no common property that threads them together. Rather, masculine can be unified with feminine by the property denotes biological sex and under the feature gender. The number that the values that a feature unifies varies from language to language. If we are talking about a language like Hindi, then it has the number values singular and plural unified under the feature number. However, if we are talking about a language like Sanskrit, it has the feature values singular, dual and plural unified under the feature number. Similarly, if we are talking about gender, the Hindi language unifies feature values masculine and feminine under gender, whereas a language like Konkani unifies the feature values masculine, feminine and neuter under the feature gender. So to develop an account of features, then we have to make decisions on two levels. At the superordinate level, that is the level of the feature, we have to identify whether all the same features have the grammatical status and properties. At the lower level, that is the hyponym level, the level of the value, the main issue is to explain how and where these values are assigned to individual words, morphemes, etc. We will now distinguish between two types of features: contextual features and fixed features. So in natural language, the relations of agreement in government indicate that not all grammatical features have the same status. While some features are inherent to some lexical items, others arise due to the syntactic configuration a lexical item finds itself in. Consider agreement and consider the following four sentences from Hindi. All of them represent subject-verb agreement. So, Hindi, आदमी आया, लड़की आई, लड़के आए, and लड़कियां आई. If we were to describe this phenomenon of verb agreement in Hindi, we would say that in Hindi, the verb, or at least the participle in this case, the participle verb, cross-references the features gender and number of the subject. Aadmi aaya has masculine singular agreement. Ladki aayi has feminine singular agreement. Ladke aaye has masculine plural agreement. And ladkiyan aayi, it has feminine plural agreement. Let us call the item whose features are copied onto the verb to be the controller of the agreement, and we call the agreeing element as the target. The agreement relation is asymmetric. Controllers and targets do not both give and receive features. Rather, controllers give and targets receive. In this sense, the controller is inherently specified for those features, whereas the target only gets them contextually. When a noun phrase is in subject position. Okay. So let's say that there is this distinction can be formalized as follows. A feature value that arises from the element itself is an inherent feature. A feature value that is given by or determined by some other element is a contextual feature. Agreement is often the only way by which we can infer the inherent features of nouns or noun phrases in languages, because it is not the case that all these features are morphologically marked. A good example of this is consonant-ending nouns in Hindi, which do not have the R-E morphological marking typically associated with masculine and feminine gender in the language. So a verb like akhbar, we know it is masculine only because the agreement on it is masculine. Similarly, a word like train, we know it is assigned the feminine gender only because the agreement on it is feminine. Now, agreement is a relation that can hold in many syntactic configurations, not only at the sentential level. So, contextual features of agreement, gender, number, or person are available to adjectives in Marwari, degree adjectives, adverbs, and verbs. What the absence of agreement indicates only indicates the absence of contextual features. That is a relation where a verb can copy onto these features. A language like Malayalam, which has no subject, verb, or adjective noun agreement, is very likely one language that disregards contextual features altogether. Even for Malayalam, there is reason to believe that there is number, person, and gender features, even though they never show up as contextual features. Because in order to describe the distinction between I, he, and she, you have to set in the pronoun system of the language, it is necessary to set up inherent features based on distinctions between person and gender. Agreement, however, can also be, so we have thus far presented agreement as a copy-paste operation, if you want, where the inherent features of the controller are copied onto the target. There is an alternative conception, which we can think of agreement as a valuation operation that assigns values to unvalued features. So that means the features are already there, but so number, gender, person features are already there on a contextually there on an item. What agreement does is value those features. Now these two conceptions differ quite significantly. In the copy-paste notion of agreement, contextual features do not pre-exist the agreement relation. But in the feature valuation account, the features do. What they lack is a value, and that is given to you to the sentence, to the morphological form by the valuation relation. So, in this agreement as valuation approach, we are seeing agreement is an operation as a feature setting operation rather than a feature donating operation. A feature valuation to approach an agreement is might indeed be preferred. Recall our example from Malayalam, where Malayalam does not appear to have any contextual features, even though it does have inherent features. The copy and paste or feature cloning operation would have to say that Malayalam lacks the copy paste operation altogether. Such an approach will then face problems from the small class of predicates which do show some agreement-like phenomenon. In Malayalam, when you use a predicative adjective, like she is good, where good is the predicative adjective, you have the features of the pronoun, indeed actually the same morphological shape as the pronoun copied onto the predicate adjective. So, aval, nallaval ana, where nalla is good and aval is the pronoun. In a feature valuation approach, however, we wouldn't have to have any such problems. Because in this one context, though we could say that in Malayalam, in all other contexts, barring this one, there is no feature valuation for contextual features, except in this predicative adjective construction, where the features of the pronoun value the contextual features of the adjective. Sticking with then this feature valuation approach, we can define agreement as follows. Agreement copies the values of inherent features of the controller into the unvalued contextual features of the target. Another phenomenon in natural language illustrates the need for a distinction between inherent and contextual features is the phenomena or the relationship of government. This notion, which is carried over from traditional grammar notions of case government, describes the form-related changes that take place between elements in a phrase. Typically, the head of a phrase causes other elements in its immediate domain to change their form. A classic example is the relationship of case in the context of a verb. In English, imagine take any two-place predicate like know. The form of, and in a sentence like I know him, in that sentence, the form change between he and him does not seem to carry any meaning change. However, that change is obligatory. And traditional understandings of this define this in terms of case government. When the head of a phrase forces the argument to change its shape because of the contextual relation of government. In traditional grammars, a verb or a preposition is said to govern a specific grammatical case on the noun phrases that co-occur at its object or subject. In highly inflecting languages, there are many patterns that arise on the basis of for each noun form. Then, depending on what syntactic position, on what relation the argument has to the verb, the case form of the noun can differ. In the lesson, we have an example of the masculine noun Agni, which has, depending on the case role that it is, semantics relation it has with the verb, its form can vary. Okay. Typically, case forms do not ultimately map onto a strict semantic relation. Indeed, Panini too has to set up a two-tiered case licensing system where the core of which is based on a semantic relation, but then there is a host of other forms which have to be explained purely by without any reference to semantics. The point of interest to us, of course, is that government is very like agreement in being contextually determined. The case of a noun phrase can only be determined once the noun is placed in a syntactic environment, just like the agreement can only be determined once the verb is required to interact by the syntax with a particular noun in its domain. However, this relation is also differs from government because it is not a cross-referencing relation. Just like agreement could be seen as a copy-paste or a feature valuation operation where some features of X are copied on or realized at Y, government does not seem to have the same properties. We shall define government as the selection of a contextual feature values of the governing. This means that a governing comes with more than one value which has to be realized in the context of the selection of a particular governor. A good example of this is the case government relation that you find on what is called inner or oblique case in Hindi linguistics. In Hindi, all nouns in an NP that is marked for case, that is bear the case marker ko, ne, me, se, par, etc. They must, all the nouns and all the elements of that noun phrase must give up their nominative forms to adopt what is known in the literature as an oblique form. So in Hindi, when you say ye lamba ladka, that's the nominative noun phrase. But as soon as you put a ko on this noun phrase, each element assumes a different form. Then you have to say is lambe ladke ko. Now note the difference between the forms. Ye changes to is, lamba changes to lambe, ladka changes to ladke, without actually any difference in the actual feature values of number and gender. The one thing that differs is the case forms of the noun. So accordingly we could say that ko is a case governor that selects for the contextual features of what we will call oblique case. This example also shows us that government in agreement can range over the case domain. In the nominative form, ye lamba ladka, the adjective agrees in number and gender with the noun. In is lambe ladke ko, the adjective agrees in number and gender and oblique case with the noun. The noun got its oblique case from or assumed its contextual feature of oblique form because of the case marking of ko. Moving on from these descriptions of feature values and their interaction by contextual and inherent features, let's now move to a formulation of value of features and their values. Using the work of Keyboard 2008, let's make a first cut between those inherent feature values that are fixed and those that are selected from a range of options. A fixed feature value is one that is lexically supplied to the element. For example, gender is a feature that is typically fixed for individual nouns. An inherent feature value may also be selected from a range of options based on whatever you want to say. Unlike gender, number is not a fixed feature value. What you do is you select from a range of values determined by the language. For in Hindi or in English, we'd have to do singular and plural. Tense is also such a similar value, as is aspect. So you can decide on whether you want to say something in the present tense, past tense, or future tense. Both fixed and selected inherent feature values may be further typologized, so that their values can be described as semantically motivated or formally motivated, or neither. The values for inherently selected feature, the inherent selected feature number, are semantically determined cross-linguistically, as are the values for tense, whether you want to speak about before now, after now, or others, or in other time frames. The fixed value gender in languages, which is not selected from the range of, could be either completely based on semantic criteria, or based on completely formal criteria, or on a mixture of both. It is frequently argued that there is no language which employs a system of grammatical gender which is entirely adducible to a fixed semantic system. Rather, usually grammatical gender systems use a mixture of formal and semantic criteria, or perhaps even opaque criteria to assign gender. Let us now go back to the working definition of feature that we began with. A feature is a set of values in contrastive distribution and their available option for realization on linguistic elements. A feature label names the property that unifies a set of values. In this definition, our statement is in two parts. One, the second sentence in the statement is about how a feature is labeled. And the statement is also, the second part of the statement says a feature comprises a set of values which also is subject to realization. So, whether the feature is realized on the element itself or on an element that it is in agreement or a government relation with. Using the work of Keyport, we can also distinguish between morphosyntactic features from morphosemantic ones. A morphosyntactic feature, she says, is a feature involved in either agreement or government, that is, its features may be either contextual or inherent. A morphosemantic feature is a feature not involved in agreement or government, that is, its values may be inherent only. Typically, features like tense are morphosemantic features or just semantic features. And distinction can also be made between morphosyntactic / semantic features or purely morphological features such as inflectional class, declension class for verbs, purely syntactic features, things like the extended projection principle, the EPP feature, purely semantic features, and purely phonological features. With this definition of features in mind, we can now redefine what is a grammatical category. We can say that a grammatical category is a set of morphosyntactic or morphosemantic features that occurs in contrastive distribution with other such features. In our scheme of things then, the key to finding a grammatical category is to find the morphosyntactic or morphosemantic features that can co-occur as set. In a category like grammatical gender is a grammatical category like grammatical gender occurs in contrastive distribution with the grammatical category of number, with the grammatical category of tense, the grammatical category of aspect. Grammatical category of gender is fixed and inherent. This fixed inherent set of features can form the basis for contextual features derived by agreement and government as well.